Okay, now moving on to our second passage, Arctic Science. Number 12. The Arctic is a gigantic natural laboratory of surprising divergence that offers exciting research possibilities in almost every branch of science. Now, this is a diction question, and the big clue here is almost every branch of science. If something offers possibilities in almost every branch of science, it is a laboratory of diversity, since diversity is the state of having many different types and forms. Also, the word surprising works well with diversity because most people perceive the Arctic to be the opposite of diversity, because when we think of diversity, we usually visualize a place that is teeming with life, filled with a variety of plants and animals, but the Arctic is actually opposite of that. It seems dead and frozen with no life. Therefore, describing the Arctic as a laboratory of diversity is in fact surprising, so surprising diversity works perfectly, and choice C is the correct answer. Number 13 now. An examination of this large-scale natural laboratory, starting in outer space above the Arctic, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent. This is a question on clause selection. First, for analytical purposes, let's reduce the auxiliary phrase, starting in outer space above the Arctic. This is a non-restrictive phrase, and we will read all four choices without this auxiliary phrase because it does not affect the logic or structure of the sentence. Choice A, after the reduction, reads, an examination of this large-scale natural laboratory, comma, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent. An examination of this laboratory is not modifying a number of fascinating features, so choice A is a dangling modifier. Choice B, in examination of this large-scale natural laboratory, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent. Although everything seems correct structurally, it is logically awkward to say that a number of fascinating features becomes apparent in our noun examination. Let's look at a simpler example. In exercise of your hamstring, a number of muscles gets healthier. Or, in exercising your hamstring, a number of muscles gets healthier. Now, it is clear that the second sentence is much more logical than the preposition plus noun structure form in exercise, because the noun exercise is not what gets a number of muscles healthier. It is the act of exercising that gets a number of muscles healthier. So when we have a noun like exercise, or for this question, examination, that when put into action results in something, we should use the present participle or ing form of that noun's action in our introductory clause. So using the noun form examination won't work here, so choice B is incorrect. Now choice C. When examined, this large-scale natural laboratory, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent. Here we have our first noun, this laboratory, and our second noun, a number. And they are just separated with only a comma, so choice C is incorrect. Choice D now. In examining this large-scale natural laboratory, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent. Choice D is correct because in examining this is an acceptable preposition plus present participle structure that modifies the noun of our main clause, which is a number. And logically, a number of fascinating features becomes apparent in examining this laboratory because the act of putting examination into action, which is examining, leads to a situation where a number of features becomes apparent. Just like in exercising this hamstring, a number of muscles gets healthier, like we talked about earlier. In practicing this routine, a number of skills improve. Not in practice of this routine, a number of skills improve. So don't use the noun form. Use the present participle or ing form when an action leads to a result. So choice D is our correct answer. Number 14 now. This means that charged particles from the sun enter the Earth's atmosphere in these regions, producing ostentatious effects such as the aurora, magnetic storms, and ionospheric disturbances which may black out radio communication. Here is another diction question, and choice A is incorrect because aurora, magnetic storms, and ionospheric disturbances are not all ostentatious, which means showy and pretentious. Aurora may be showy, since these are northern lights that are very beautiful to look at, but magnetic storms are invisible and ionospheric disturbances take place so high up in the atmosphere that we can't even see them. So choice A is wrong. Choice B works very well because conspicuous generally just means standing out. All of these three effects stand out in their own ways, even though they do not all stand out visibly. So choice B sounds like our answer. But let's continue checking the rest of the choices because we must always look for the best choice. Glaring in choice C means dazzling from brightness, and similar to choice A, some of these effects like magnetic storms and ionospheric disturbances are not visible to us and therefore would not be glaring. So choice C is wrong. And finally, choice D, protrusive, means obtrusive or thrusting forward. None of these effects particularly thrust forward, so protrusive wouldn't be the appropriate word to describe these effects. Therefore, choice B is our best answer. Now, even if you don't know what aurora and ionospheric disturbances are, you should still be able to solve this question just from being familiar with magnets. Yes, College Board says you don't need outside information, but they do expect you to have common knowledge, like being familiar enough with magnets to know that magnetic storms are formed by magnetic fields which are not visible or protrusive. Number 15. Lower in the atmosphere, the high-velocity westerly jet stream is affected by processes of energy exchange at the Earth's surface in the Arctic, by sea ice distribution and ocean and land temperatures, and in turn affects the weather and climate of the entire hemisphere or even the whole Earth. This question is one on commonly confused words, specifically affect and effect. Now we ask ourselves, does jet stream, which is a strong wind, affect the weather and climate or affect the weather and climate? Since there are other factors besides strong wind that influences the weather and climate, we cannot say strong wind affects the weather and climate because effect implies that strong wind directly and fully determines weather and climate. Therefore, we can eliminate choices A and B, and we just have to decide what affect or affects the weather and climate. Well, the jet stream, which is a singular noun, should be linked to a singular verb, which is affects. So choice C is correct because jet stream affects. And you may say, hey, what if I don't know if weather is fully or partially affected by jet stream? That's outside information I'm not required to know. Well, if you look earlier in the sentence though, it says jet stream is affected, so it would in turn affect again, because you use in turn when the same action is done. So choice C is our correct answer. Number 16. Alaska is an ideal laboratory for studying these ice forms. It is from individual ice crystals under a microscope to the millions of square kilometers of sea ice as seen by a satellite. This is a question on modifier logic. Modifiers need to modify the correct words in order for sentences to make sense. The original sentence actually doesn't have a modifier and starts a new sentence starting with it is to refer back to forms in the previous sentence. This structure that refers to the last word of a preceding sentence by using it is to start the next sentence is never a good structure. It's a wordy, redundant structure that is never correct and one that can be improved with the proper use of a modifying phrase. Besides the redundancy though, it, which is a singular pronoun, cannot refer back to the plural word, forms, but even if the original sentence said they are, choice A is still incorrect for redundant reasons as mentioned before. Choice B gives the range of the verb form since it says form from A to B. Now if you say these ice which form from this and that would give the ingredients that form ice. But here the structure says these ice which form from here to there. Therefore, it sounds like the ice formed from crystals under a microscope to the sea. So you have sort of a string of ice starting from under your microscope to the sea, which makes no sense. Choice C, similar to choice B, gives the range of the forming as it says forming from here to there. So it sounds like ice is forming from crystals under a microscope to the sea again, which similar to choice B makes no sense. Choice D works very well structurally and conceptually. From individual ice crystals to the millions of square kilometers of sea ice is a non-restrictive phrase that correctly modifies ice forms by giving the range of different ice forms that exist in Alaska. The difference in choice D and the reason why the range does not refer to the physical location of the ice forms is that in choices B and C, the words form or forming precede the word from as action words, and thus the from to phrase gives the physical range of the form or forming action, while in choice D, form is used as a noun, which is why the from to phrase gives the range of the different forms of ice in noun form. So choice D is our correct answer. Number 17. The solution of practical problems associated with avalanches, building roads and houses on permafrost, extracting petroleum from ice-covered waters, and numerous others, depending on fundamental research that can be conducted in the Alaska setting. This question is on verb tense. Let's first reduce the sentence by eliminating of practical problems, which is a prepositional phrase. Also, eliminate our past participle phrase associated with avalanches, building roads and houses on permafrost, extracting petroleum from ice-covered waters, and numerous others. And let's reread the sentence. The solution depending on fundamental research that can be conducted in the Alaska setting. This is a dependent clause with no verb. Depending here is used as a present participle phrase to modify solution. That can be conducted is a dependent clause also modifying research. And in the Alaska setting is a prepositional phrase modifying conducted. So there is no verb as this is just a string of dependent and prepositional phrases. If depending were used as a verb, it would have to be preceded with a linking verb. When there is no linking verb, ing verbs function as either gerunds or present participles, so choice A is incorrect as it has no verb. Choice D is wrong because using depended or a past tense verb implies that the solution depended on fundamental research in the past, but not anymore, which contradicts with the rest of the tone and context of this passage. So now we just have to decide if our noun is singular or plural to select between choices B and C. The solution depend or the solution depends on fundamental research. Well, solution is singular, so we must use a singular verb, depends, and therefore choice B is our correct answer. Number 18. Alaska is also part of the Pacific Rim of Fire. This is where tectonic activity has created a unique and dangerous environment. This is a comma splice question. The original sentence has two independent clauses joined by just a comma with no conjunction. The first part, Alaska is also part of the Pacific Rim of Fire, is an independent clause. And the second part, this is where tectonic activity has created a unique and dangerous environment, is also an independent clause. There's no conjunction between the two independent clauses, and therefore, choice A is an incorrect comma splice. The simplest way to fix a comma splice when the second independent clause starts by referring to the end of the preceding independent clause is to simply insert a phrase that modifies the end of the preceding sentence. Choice B does exactly that by inserting a where phrase to refer to the location, Pacific Rim of Fire, which is the end of the preceding independent clause. And so choice B is our correct answer. Being in choice C is not an optimal word to refer to locations like Pacific Rim of Fire, and it is in choice D is redundant because we just mentioned the Pacific Rim of Fire, so we don't need to refer to it again by saying it is. Remember, although choice D doesn't technically contain any structural grammatical errors, we are looking for the best choice, and B is more concise than D, which is redundant, similar to question 16, choice A. Number 19. Within its boundary, Alaska encloses a long island, the arc associated with a deep ocean trench, 40 active volcanoes, and heavy earthquake activity. This is a question on adjectives. There are times when nouns can be turned into adjectives without losing relevant information and affecting the context of the statement. And here, a long island can function as an adjective to fully modify our noun arc. When you can do this, the adjective noun structures are preferable to noun modifier or noun plus preposition structures, and our adjective noun structure choice is choice B. What type of arc is it? It's a long island arc. Number 20. For the sake of the cohesion of this paragraph, sentence 3 should be placed. So, sentence 3 says, since from 5 to 7% of the world's potentially most devastating earthquakes occur in Alaska, this is an ideal location for the study of the Earth's structure and its often violent surface movements. This is a content question, and the key word here is earthquakes. Since sentence 3 is a statistical detail on how many of the world's earthquakes occur in Alaska, we need a more general preceding statement on earthquakes to effectively lead into detailed statistics on earthquakes. Sentence 5 does just that. Within its boundary, Alaska encloses a long island arc associated with a deep ocean trench, 40 volcanoes, and heavy earthquake activity. So choice D after sentence 5 is our correct answer. Number 21. For the sake of clarity of expression and meaning, the underlined portion of the sentences should be written as follows. Other nations are expending great efforts in the study of the Arctic because they understand that the keys to many of our planet's present and future problems may lie in this region if the United States is to participate in this process in any meaningful way. It must begin to involve itself in Arctic research now. This is a question that requires us to recognize the modifier logic behind the statements. In the original statement, it sounds like the keys to many of our planet's present and future problems lie in this region only if the United States is to participate in this process, which is incorrect. The keys of our planet's problems lie in this region irrespective of the US's participation or lack thereof. Therefore, we need to separate the thought by ending the sentence after saying the keys to our problems lie in this region. Now the phrase, if the US is to participate in this process in any meaningful way, that phrase is a reason that the US must begin to involve itself in Arctic research now. A simplified congruent structure is, if you want to do this, you must do that. Therefore, choice B is our correct answer. All other choices do not end the sentence after stating that the keys lie in this region, and therefore they all place an illogical condition on the keys to our planet's problems lying in the Arctic, as if the keys lie in this region only if the US participates in this process, which would be a claim that contradicts with the tone and context of the rest of this passage. And the final question for this passage, number 22. Which choice most effectively establishes the main topic of the paragraph? Okay, so yet another content question. So let's go through each choice here. A. The Arctic's unique environment. Yes, the paragraph does talk about the Arctic's unique environment, but it goes beyond that. The unique environment is just a reason why we should participate and begin to involve in Arctic research. So A doesn't capture the entire scope of the paragraph's main topic. Choice B. The Arctic's place in the Earth's ecosystem. Similar to choice A, the paragraph, it does talk about its place in the Earth's ecosystem, but again, mentions it to set a reason for us to involve in Arctic research. So choice B also doesn't capture the entire scope of the paragraph's topic. Also, the paragraph doesn't have just an informational tone like choices A and B imply. It has a call to action to end not only the paragraph, but also the passage for that matter, right? So choices A and B are toned too informationally and they fail to capture the more important point of the paragraph, which is that we need to participate and involve now. Choice C, the importance of Arctic research for the US and other countries. This works great because the paragraph is mainly about the fact that it is important for us to involve in Arctic research because the Arctic has these unique and diverse structures, dynamics, and behavior. Then the paragraph says other nations are involved in the study of the Arctic and goes on to say that's why the US needs to also start doing this now. All of the informational parts of the statements are connected in some way to emphasize that these are reasons that we should involve in Arctic research. So clearly, the paragraph's point is not to merely inform you, like choices A and B suggest, but to induce US involvement. And finally, choice D doesn't work because the paragraph doesn't talk about how the participation must be executed. It merely says we need to participate and involve in Arctic research because the Arctic has these and those characteristics. So, choice C is our correct answer.